Hi, today I'm going to read for you part 2 of Dinosaurs Before Dark, okay? The excellent story by Mary Pope Osborne. Now, we've already read chapters 1 and 3, and Annie and Jack went into a treehouse. It's like a new treehouse behind their house. And they went up there and they saw many books in the treehouse. And they looked out the windows and they could see the library and their house, and they could see their neighbor's dog, Henry. But then they looked at some of the books, and they looked at a dinosaur book, and they said, I wish I could see this dinosaur. And then the treehouse spun, and then there they were. They were back 65 million years ago. Okay, and now Annie is going to go and pet the pteranodon. Okay. So chapter 4. Get your book. Chapter 4 is called Henry. Henry, just like the dog, their neighbor's dog. Jack gasped as Annie held out her hand. Oh, brother, she was always trying to make friends with animals, but this was going too far. Don't get too close to him, Annie, Jack shouted. But Annie touched the pteranodon's crest behind his head. She stroked its neck. She was talking to him. What in the world was she saying? Jack took a deep breath. Okay. He would go down too. It would be good to examine the creature, take notes like a scientist. Jack started down the rope ladder. When he got to the ground, Jack was only a few feet away from the creature. The creature stared at Jack. His eyes were bright and alert. He's soft, Jack, said Annie. He feels like Henry. Jack snorted. He's no dog, Annie. Feel him, Jack, said Annie. Jack didn't move. Don't think, Jack. Just do it. Jack stepped forward. He put out his arm. Very cautiously, he brushed his hand down the creature's neck. Interesting. A thin layer of fuzz covered the pteranodon's skin. Soft, huh? Said Annie. Jack reached into his backpack and pulled out a pencil and notebook. He wrote, fuzzy skin. What are you doing? Asked Annie. Taking notes, said Jack. We're probably the first people in the whole world to ever see a real live pteranodon. Jack looked at the pteranodon again. The creature had a bony crest on top of his head. The crest was longer than Jack's arm. Wow. I wonder how smart he is, Jack said. Very smart, said Annie. Don't count on it, said Jack. His brain's probably no bigger than a bean. No, he's very smart. I can feel it, said Annie. I'm going to call him Henry. Jack wrote in his notebook, small brain? See, there's his big long crest. And here Jack is writing in his notebook. He's a little bit like a scientist. Jack looked at the creature again. Maybe he's a mutant, he said. The creature tilted his head. Annie laughed. He's no mutant, Jack. Well, what's he doing here then? Where is this place? Said Jack. Annie leaned close to the pteranodon. Do you know where we are, Henry? She asked softly. The creature fixed its eyes on Annie. His long jaws were opening and closing like a giant pair of scissors. Are you trying to talk to me, Henry? Asked Annie. Forget it, Annie, Jack wrote in his notebook. Mouth like scissors? Did we come to a time long ago, Henry? Asked Annie. Is this a place from long ago? Suddenly she gasped, Jack! He looked up. Annie was pointing toward the hill. On top stood a huge dinosaur. Chapter 5. Gold in the grass. Go, go, said Jack. He threw his notebook into his pack. He pushed Annie toward the rope ladder. Bye, Henry, she said. Go, said Jack. He gave Annie a big push. Quit it, she said, but she started up the ladder. Jack scrambled after her. They tumbled into the treehouse. They were panting as they looked out the window at the dinosaur. He was standing on the hilltop, eating flowers off a tree. Eating flowers, maybe a nice dinosaur. Oh, man, whispered Jack. We are in a time long ago. The dinosaur looked like a huge rhinoceros. Only he had 3 horns instead of 1. 2 long ones above his eyes and 1 on his nose. He had a big shield-like thing behind his head. Triceratops, said Jack. Does he eat people? Whispered Annie. I'll look it up. Jack grabbed the dinosaur book. He flipped through the pages. There, he said. He pointed to a picture of a Triceratops. He read the caption. The Triceratops lived in the late Cretaceous period. This plant-eating dinosaur weighed over 12,000 pounds. That's like 5,000 kilograms. Jack slammed the book shut. Just plants, no meat. Let's go see him, said Annie. So Annie wants to see all the dinosaurs. Are you nuts? Said Jack. Don't you want to take notes about him? Asked Annie. We're probably the first people in the whole world to see a real live Triceratops. Jack sighed. She was right. Let's go, he said. He shoved the dinosaur book into his pack. He slung it over his shoulder and started down the ladder. On the way down, Jack stopped. He called up to Annie. Just promise you won't pet him. I promise. Promise you won't kiss him. I promise. Promise you won't talk to him. I promise. Promise you won't. Go, go, she said. Jack went. Annie followed. When they stepped off the ladder, the pteranodon gave them a kind look. Annie blew a kiss at him. Be back soon, Henry, she said cheerfully. Shush, said Jack, and he led the way through the ferns, slowly and carefully. When he reached the bottom of the hill, he kneeled behind a fat bush. Annie knelt beside him and started to speak. Shush! Jack put his finger to his lips. Annie made a face. Jack peeked out at the Triceratops. The dinosaur was incredibly big, bigger than a truck. He was eating the flowers off a magnolia tree. Jack slipped his notebook out of his pack. He wrote, eats flowers. Annie nudged him. Jack ignored her. He studied the Triceratops again. He wrote, eats slowly. Annie nudged him hard. Ugh! Jack looked at her. Annie pointed to herself. She walked her fingers through the air. She pointed to the dinosaur. She smiled. Was she teasing? She waved at Jack. Jack started to grab her. She laughed and jumped away. She fell into the grass in full view of the Triceratops. Triceratops can step on people. Get back, whispered Jack. Too late. The big dinosaur had spotted Annie. He gazed down at her from the hilltop. Half of a magnolia flower was sticking out of his mouth. Oops, said Annie. Get back, Jack shouted at her. He looks nice, Jack. Nice? Watch out for his horns, Annie. No, he's nice, Jack. Nice. But the Triceratops just gazed calmly down at Annie. Then he turned and loped away down the side of the hill. Bye, said Annie. She turned back to Jack. See? Jack grunted. Ugh. But he wrote in his notebook. Nice. There he is, loping away. Come on, let's look around some more, said Annie. As Jack started after Annie, he saw something glittering in the tall grass. He reached out and picked it up. A medallion. A gold medallion. Maybe important. Okay. A letter was engraved on the medallion. A fancy M. Oh man, someone came here before us, Jack said softly. Okay, so the medallion is definitely man-made. Okay, and so Jack knows now that they're not the first ones to go back in time. Okay, this is Dinosaurs Before Dark. We'll look at the other chapters later.